You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and regrettably, I'm bringing you an update to a mass shooting at a Georgia school last week. You guys, these are my least favorite. I've had people ask me how I research these horrible crimes and not have it have any effect on me. And the real answer is, when adults harm adults, it's bad. But kids harming kids is haunting to me. And I don't know how else to explain it. Maybe it's because we as adults aren't protecting them. Maybe that's why it's so haunting to me. I just don't know. But the school shootings are the most difficult cases that I bring you. School is supposed to just not be a place where you get killed in your science class or after recess. And this story is no different. It's haunting. And it does seem that there were warning signs. So let's dive in. I'll tell you all about it. On Wednesday, students were just about to close out their first period class at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. Layla Sayrath told CNN that her and 14-year-old Colt Gray were in Algebra 1 class together. She said Colt got up to leave class, and after he exited the room, the door locked behind him. You guys, that's a safety measure. When he knocked on the door just shortly before the end of class to be let back in, the student who answered the knock and approached the door to open it looked through the glass window. Seeing Colt holding a gun, the student refused to let him in. Colt left, and it probably saved lives in that Algebra 1 class, but it didn't save lives in a neighboring classroom or hallway. Within moments, the students heard rapid-fire shots, about 10 to 15 of them in a nearby classroom and hallway. Again, another safety measure was in place. School's faculty had been provided a form of ID known as Centigix. This ID has technology embedded that if a button is pushed on the ID, it alerts administration and the school's 2 resource officers. Again, that was another safety measure. Not just one officer, but 2 are in the school. One of the officers arrived on the scene quickly and confronted Colt, taking him down from shooting more students and teachers. Colt surrendered and was taken into custody, but death had occurred. 2 14-year-old students, Christian Angulo and Mason Schemerhorn, went to school that day and they never returned home. And 2 math teachers, 53-year-old Christina Irami and 39-year-old Richard Aspinwall, who was also an assistant football coach, well, they didn't return to their loved ones either. In addition to the 4 who were murdered, 9 others were injured and transported to the hospital. Thankfully, they are all expected to recover from their injuries. And if you remember, I started this shooting update with the idea that it could have possibly been stopped. Here's what we've discovered. Back in May of 2023, so more than a year ago, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office received a tip from the FBI about a threat on the chat platform Discord. The threat claimed someone was going to shoot up a middle school the next day. Well, that threat, it came from an account that had an email that belonged to Colt Gray or someone in Colt Gray's household. And here's where it gets creepy. The username on the account was in Russian. And when translated to English, it loosely means Adam Lanza. Now, that might be familiar to you because Adam is the name of the gunman who killed 26 people at Sandy Hook Elementary School in 2012. Colt was subsequently interviewed about this threat, and he said someone else had framed him and that he would never make such a threat, even in a joking manner. Colt's father, Colin, told the FBI investigators that he had hunting rifles in his house, and he explained that Colt was allowed to use those rifles when he was supervised, but that he doesn't have unfettered access to the rifles. The investigators urged Colin to lock up his guns. Colin was also advised to keep Colt out of school until the matter was resolved. The investigators then theorized that the case could be closed because the allegations that Colt or even Colin were behind the username on the Discord account, well, they just couldn't be substantiated. The sheriff's office doubled down shortly after the shooting on Wednesday, saying that the then 13-year-old denied making the threats and that there wasn't enough evidence to prove that he did. And the could it be stopped concept goes even deeper. On the morning of the shooting, before the bullets tore through the victims at Appalachia High, the school received a phone threat. The call warned there would be shootings at 5 schools and that Appalachia would be the first one. When I made this recording, it was still unclear who placed that call. Investigators told CNN that they have not found any evidence that other schools were targeted in any manner, but that all avenues are being pursued. And to even go deeper down that rabbit hole of could this be prevented? When authorities searched Colt's bedroom, they found documents that investigators believe reference past school shootings, including the 2018 school massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. But that discovery, that's just the tip of the iceberg at this family home. Investigators have discovered that Colt's parents went through a bitter separation and a custody dispute in recent years. That dispute led to them calling law enforcement on each other, and then the entire family being evicted from at least one home. Colt's mom was also arrested for keying her husband's car and also for drug possession. All while this was going on, you also had Colt's grandfather, on his mother's side, accusing Colt's father of being verbally abusive towards the entire family. That grandfather, Charles, told CNN that Colt's father beat up upon Colt verbally. He said he would scream and holler and that he would do it to Colt's sister as well. But transversely, he said he has never seen Colt become angry despite the turbulent family atmosphere. And then there's this. Just 8 months after Colt was approached by the FBI about that Discord profile that made that school shooting threat, well, his father went on to buy Colt an AR-15 style rifle for a holiday present in December of 2023. That gun was purchased at a local store for Colt and does appear to be the gun he used for the shooting on Wednesday. More disturbing details about his upbringing have emerged since the shooting, like the fact that Child Protective Services was called multiple times during Colt's life, all of this according to the New York Post. A relative of Marcy Gray, that's Colt's mother, well, that relative told the Post that Marcy was the black sheep of her side of the family. Her past includes a lengthy rap sheet with drug and domestic violence busts. Lauren, a neighbor who lived next door to the Grays, said the children were always wearing dirty clothes, and sometimes they even went hungry. The family of the Grays did tell the Post, however, that these are not unintelligent people. They have college degrees. They are educated. They just chose unwisely in their lifestyles. The family also told the Post that Colin Gray was a bad example to his children and that he had difficulty holding down a job. Well, the law seemed to agree, at least on the complicity portion of the shooting, because Colin Gray has been arrested and charged with 4 counts of manslaughter, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and 8 counts of cruelty to children. Both Colin and Colt made their initial court appearances on Friday, where they learned their charges could result in each of them spending the rest of their lives in jail. Now, neither one of them entered a plea at their individual court hearings, and bond was not given for either as well. Colt was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. The next hearings are set for December 4th. Now, CNN is now reporting that more charges are likely to be added to Colt's current charges to account for the injured victims. And you might be asking why Colt isn't facing the death penalty. Well, you guys, it's his age. In Georgia and most of the United States, a 14-year-old cannot be sentenced to anything more than life in prison. Both are being represented by public defenders, but the family told the Post that they are trying to pull together enough money to hire a different lawyer for Colt. CNN did reveal on Friday that during questioning following the shooting, Colt said he was responsible simply by saying, "I did it." Now, students have been sharing their horror stories from last week's shooting. They told authorities that their math teacher, Richard Aspinwall, heard the shots in the hallway and went out of their classroom door to see what he could do. Allegedly, Colt shot Richard, and then Richard staggered back into the classroom, holding his chest. Malaysia Mitchell told CNN she watched Richard fall to the floor from his chest wound. She said some boys ripped their shirts off to try and stop the bleeding of Richard's chest wound by holding the compression against the gaping bullet hole. And other students slammed the door shut and they took cover. Malaysia said she knows Mr. Aspinwall would want everyone to keep learning and return to school. So let's remember the 4 victims. The other math teacher, Christina Iremy, she was a hero on that morning because it has been reported that she jumped in front of a student to protect the child from the spray of bullets. Isaac, who was a student in Christina's math class, told CBS News that Christina always instilled confidence in her students, telling them they could do math, they could conquer it. He also said she was fond of telling corny jokes to lighten the mood of the classroom. Now, we already mentioned Richard, the football coach and math teacher. His post-game ritual was to find his wife in the end zone and hug her after every game. His players said he was the kind of man that walked the walk, that he had high standards of himself first, and then he asked his players to meet those standards as well. 14-year-old Christian Angulo was the youngest of those shot and killed. Multiple students referred to him as sweet, saying he was kind to everyone at school. A GoFundMe has raised tens of thousands for his family since the shooting. And Mason Schemmerhorn, friends of the family that were interviewed by the New York Times, said he was a family-oriented kid who enjoyed his life. They said his family had an upcoming trip to Disney World planned and that Mason was eagerly awaiting for the vacation with his family. Now, I want to end this update by reminding everyone, we've talked about this on the podcast before, the arresting and the charging of parents when their children murder. I extensively covered the Ethan Crumley case out of Oxford, Michigan. Both him and his parents were found guilty of 4 students murdered at that mass school shooting event in 2021. His parents are serving 10-year sentences and are currently appealing their guilty verdicts. Now, the 2 cases do have similarities, and according to the arrest warrant for Colin, one thing is glaring in similarity. The warrant alleges Colin knew his son was a threat to himself and to others, and he did not act upon that threat by keeping the guns locked up, like the FBI had asked him to. The Crumleys were accused and found guilty of the exact same thing. They knew their son was emotionally unstable and that he could hurt himself and others. And they also allowed Ethan to have access to guns unfettered. The Michigan prosecutor of the Crumley case told the AP that we're just not going to see the floodgates open and parents charged with all sorts of crimes when their children break the law. Instead, she said that most parents don't need the threat of prosecution, that most parents are actually trying to actively find help for their children when they exhibit disturbing behavior. And because of this, we won't see a spike in parents being prosecuted. Unfortunately, it seems Colin and Marcy weren't those parents. Now to a story out of Michigan where a prisoner did something no lawyer would likely recommend. He represented himself in his appeals process. And guess what? He won. Back in 2016, Talia Ashford owned and operated a makeup and hair studio in Ferndale, Michigan. The property, which was located on the 2nd floor of a commercial building, saw dozens of clients each week. On the afternoon of September 16th, Talia locked up the salon at 4 p.m. and she left for the evening. The next morning at 5 a.m., she returned to start the workday, and she found her business had been ransacked. Almost all of her inventory was stolen, as well as a television, a computer, and a decorative clock. It was a loss of more than $12,000. As Talia surveyed the damage and the loss, she noticed an opened Coke bottle and a cigarette lighter. She wasn't sure those 2 items were there when she locked down the salon the afternoon before. And that's the evidence prosecutors ran with. They tested the bottle and found 2 deposits of trace DNA. And one of those deposits was linked to 65-year-old Gregory Dean Tucker. When Gregory faced a jury trial for the burglary charge, he was found guilty and he began serving his sentence for that crime. Now, it's important to note, he was linked to other burglaries after his guilty verdict, and he was serving time for those convictions as well. But Gregory was undaunted, and he began preparing for the appeals process, theorizing that a Coke bottle could have been placed there by any number of clients, and his trace DNA could have ended up there in multiple scenarios. His appeals weren't going well. But in a last-ditch effort, he submitted a habeas corpus appeal, and this summer, U.S. District Judge David Lawson reviewed that appeal. And last week, Judge Lawson published his 14-page opinion on the habeas corpus appeal. Unexpectedly, Judge Lawson ruled that Gregory's conviction for breaking and entering with the intent to commit larceny was to be vacated. Judge Lawson said the trace deposit was not sufficient by itself to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. He wrote that the presence of Gregory's DNA on that Coke bottle did not lead to the conclusion that he was present at the crime scene. So what was missing? Well, the judge said prosecutors could not explain a connection between Gregory and the salon. They also didn't offer a reason that his DNA would be there. Basically, there were too many gaps in the prosecution's conclusions. Judge Lawson also wrote that no surveillance evidence was presented showing Gregory near the scene on that day. And furthermore, no fingerprints were found inside the studio that could be matched to Gregory. Now, in an interview with the Associated Press from Parental Correctional Facility, that's where he remains behind bars for his other convictions, Gregory said he was, quote, overwhelmed by the ruling, adding that he was clueless as to how the Coke bottle had wound up inside the salon. He also mentioned that a Coke bottle has monetary value in Michigan since anyone can turn in a bottle and receive 10 cents. He told the AP that you can leave a bottle on the east side of the city and it can end up on the west side of the city in the same day. Now, the AP also went on to interview Ann Yantis, who is a lawyer that works in the state appellate defender office. She told the AP that an inmate representing himself through the last resort federal appeals process, known as a habeas claim, is a challenging feat. She said she is impressed that this man had enough confidence in himself and his legal skills to represent himself, noting most prisoners couldn't accomplish this. It's not over for Gregory, though. Danny Wimmer of Michigan's Department of Attorney General is seeking an appeal of the overturned case. And they have time because Gregory is, like I said, still behind bars for his 2 breaking and entering convictions out of Oakland and Wayne counties. All right, shall we stay in Michigan? Sure, why not? Because this is a crazy story. This time, we are in the city of Flint, where what should be a wonderful celebration, the day you marry the love of your life, well, that celebration instead turned into the day that someone was charged with murder. 21-year-old Savannah Collier and 22-year-old James Shira said their I do's on August 30th. James had his good friend, 29-year-old Terry Taylor, as a groomsman. Okay, this sounds like a great day, right? It was, until a fight broke out between Terry and James at the pizzeria where the wedding was held. Instead of the two separating, calming down, catching a breath, the argument continued at a home, and that led to James running over Terry with his SUV. When first responders arrived, they found Terry clinging to life. He was rushed to the Hurley Medical Center, but he died shortly after he arrived. James has now been arrested and charged with second-degree murder. He is being held without bail. His wife, Savannah, well, she's been charged with accessory after the fact. She was released last week after she posted 10% of her $4,000 bail. Now, Terry was a father of 3 and was expecting his 4th child with his fiancée, Nikki. He loved fishing and riding 4-wheelers. And let's finish with this story. Out of Florida. On the Sunday of Labor Day weekend, 24-year-old Mackenzie Tate was driving in the early morning hours on U.S. Route 192 when she hit a 34-year-old man on a motorcycle at an intersection. The collision sent him flying off of his motorcycle, and the impact was so intense that his helmet flew off his head. Now, the biker landed in the middle of the intersection, having sustained life-threatening injuries. But Mackenzie didn't stop. She didn't call for first responders. She didn't check on the man she had just hit. Instead, she kept driving her 2015 Toyota RAV4 down the state highway with the victim's motorcycle stuck in the undercarriage of her car. She pulled into Coastal Hyundai sales lot, and she tried to hide her car amongst the other cars parked and for sale. Camera footage from the car lot shows Mackenzie trying to dislodge the motorcycle from her car, but she wasn't strong enough to do so. She is then seen running through the parking lot of the car dealership. Then she's seen on footage making a phone call on her cell phone. Shortly after the call, a black sedan pulls up and Mackenzie jumps inside to escape the scene. Oh, but Mackenzie, you left your car behind. And the fact that Mackenzie tried to remove the motorcycle scored her an additional charge when police arrested her because she had tampered with evidence. Now, once she was arrested and charged with tampering as well as leaving the scene of an accident, Her bond was set at $17,500, and she was then released from custody. She will be back in the courtroom on October 1st. The motorcyclist is still in the hospital at the time of this recording, and his injuries are listed as critical. All right, that's your Monday episode of Rise in Crime. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. I hope this really helps you get through the day, whether it's part of your commute or you're just needing an escape from your everyday life. If you're loving the content, please share this show with a friend. And we always love 5-star reviews and positive comments here at Oh No Media. You can like and follow all of our social media for Rise in Crime, Into the Dark, and Murder with My Husband. Join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules. And keep safe out there.